We were gonna go to Maine on a honeymoon.
We'd never been there, but it was
So,
too far to go.
but
in
get
one
there,
day.
so after the reception, we drove about 60 miles into the Finger Lake region of New York onto Lake Skinny-Atlas. And we stayed at an old-fashioned Skinny-Atlas Inn. And so it was very nice, and then we went on and spent time in New Hampshire, went to Stoddard, New Hampshire, so
Oh, yeah.
she could see that. And then we went to Maine, to Mount Katahdin. No, we didn't go to Mount Katahdin. We went to Mount Desert Island at Bar Harbor. So it was good, but I think I told you the story about on our 10th anniversary with kids, I thought I would romantically surprise her to go back to the Skinny Atlas Inn. So we get there and got settled in the rooms and so forth and dinner, and so I was expecting her in a minute, oh, how romantic this is, you know, this is just so wonderful to be back and so forth. And no reaction, you know, so next morning we had breakfast and went out and walked along the lake as we had on our honeymoon, and no reaction. So finally, as we got near Maine, I said, what'd you think of Skinny Atlas? You know, it sounded kind of familiar. And I said, well, you spent your first night of your honeymoon there. And she said, we did.
And I said, well, I was so infatuated with my new groom, I didn't even notice the surroundings.
I see. Okay. First place we lived was in
Bergenfield, New Jersey.
Bergenfield, New Jersey, which
Foster
was right
Village.
near the George Washington Bridge. And our neighbors were upstairs, Frank and Nancy Clary.
And just across were the Stutzes.
The Swiss couple from Switzerland called
Dory and Walter.
Dory and
Stutz.
Walter Stutz. And
Yeah.
it was a little apartment.
And
It
of course-
was one bedroom.
Yeah.
Our Paul was born about the same time as their oldest son was born, who was named Russell. In fact, we have pictures of them at their first birthday party.
All called him Rah-Rah.
And that was a time when it was okay to confine your kids in, what did you call those?
Playpens.
Playpens.
I
They're
mean,
pens.
I couldn't have
And now,
I couldn't
of
have
course,
functioned
if you-
without playpens.
If you did that, and Russell and Paul would play in these playpens along with a little Swiss person, and
Her name was Linda.
Linda, that's right. And, but nowadays, if you put somebody in a playpen, I mean, they'd probably ship you off to jail for abuse. We had to get across the George Washington Bridge to Columbia Presbyterian Hospital where her doctor was. And of course, if it had been rush hour, we'd have never made it. So fortunately.
I was a little concerned about that ahead of time, but it worked out.
And
But
he was born at sunrise, right?
yeah, it was
You
sunrise.
kept saying
And
this.
I was facing like I never used anything. I mean, I had natural childbirth. So I remember when they took him out, I mean, he would hear the sun was rising. I was like, oh, isn't this wonderful? Our firstborn.
This was before they would allow
Oh,
men into the birthing center.
Now you have a whole
Oh, and what?
room to yourself and your family and all your, I think more people than you would want to
The
have
nice
around.
thing you liked about it, it was you had to spend 10 days in the hospital.
10 days.
And she thought, this is the best vacation I ever had.
10 days, wow.
Yeah, and all the other women were, of course,
Now you
there
get kicked
too.
out, I think, the day you're born.
Well, we didn't have very long to learn because the second child came along pretty darn quickly. And by then, we were in another house.
Where were we
A
then?
rented house in Little Falls. Well,
that's
no,
right,
actually,
Olympo.
David was born while we were still in the apartment in Bergenfield,
Right.
but we moved like 2 weeks after he
And we
was
had to
born.
do the George Washington Bridge thing again,
Yeah.
which worked out well.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember when David was christened.
Oh, my gosh.
Who stood
Nancy and Frank were standing up with
Okay,
us.
they were standing up. So,
And don't put Nancy and me together because we're going to always giggle.
so we were waiting in the pew to go up for the christening. And all of a sudden, David lets the load out. I mean, it's
In
filled
a borrowed
the
white
whole church,
dress.
the sound and the stink. So with that, I thought Elsie would be embarrassed and say, let's run out and change him. But she and Nancy were laughing so hard that I had to carry that guy around with it. It was dripping everywhere. It was bad. So David made a hit on his christening day.
May 31st, 1959. By the time Ginny
Ginny
came,
came.
we were living in Virginia.
And we came over from Virginia, so she was born in the District of Columbia. But they had so many people who were about to deliver that she was not in the room, she was just in a bed out in the hall.
I was?
Yeah, you don't remember that?
No, I don't.
And I used to go in there and say, is it time for delivery? And no, but so they finally rolled you into the operating room or delivery room. But you was zonked out in the hall there for.
Well, I never took any, anesthesia or anything. But but it's the custom when they deliver the baby to put the baby on the mother's stomach. And while they're tying up the things and so forth. And so I had Ginny on my stomach and I was kind of falling asleep and I'm like, oh, I don't want to drop this baby. But it would be awful if I said, take my baby away or something. And I kept thinking, oh, she's going to fall on the floor. Oh, she's going to fall on the floor. But she didn't.
And she got named Virginia because we lived in Virginia.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh.
What?
We had Virginia picked out for the first two boys, but didn't work.
We were in Louisville, Kentucky.
Louisville,
remember that?
Kentucky, yeah.
And living in a little town called Linden, Kentucky.
And so we named our daughter
Lynn.
Lynn. Imagine that.
She nearly, it was a brand new hospital in Louisville, and I think you were the first one to deliver there.
Yeah, I was all alone there. I
Beautiful
was so
hospital.
lonely.
But it came time for you to come home, and they wouldn't allow her to leave until the baby was properly named
Oh, yeah.
and could be registered and so forth. And she couldn't make up her mind, and we changed it
And
about 10 times.
yeah, I knew I wanted her middle name to be Ruth, but I didn't like Lynn Ruth. But I thought Carolyn Ruth is okay. So finally we named her Carolyn, knowing we would never call her Carolyn. And of course,
But that
it's been a
delayed,
problem for her all her
delayed
life.
your coming home about 2 days because
No, it wasn't 2
it
days.
was, yeah, I remember that. Because it was springtime, wasn't it?
March.
March. And the 3 little ones had chickens, baby chickens for Easter.
Yeah, I had gone to the 5 and 10 just about a couple days before I went into labor, and they were having these little chickens, and they were so cute and fluffy. So we gave you each a chicken.
But I brought them back from the hospital, and Jenny was walking around the front yard with a chicken by the neck to give it to Lynn.
And then
the
these
chicken, of course,
and then these chickens were growing and flapping around, and I'm like, what do we do with these? But somebody knew a farmer who would take them or something.
So Lynn was born in Linden, Kentucky, and named
Right.
Carolyn.
Right. Comes the Sloan year,
Oh.
and I didn't have any babies during that year. I can't imagine it.
The MIT has a program for an MBA, which the company selects people to go to, and we went up to that for a year. It was started in June, and we got out in June. And we lived in the town of Needham, Massachusetts. 300 years old at that time. The first time we went
That
there.
was a really nice town, a classy
It was a
town.
very nice town. So we lived there, but we didn't have any kids that year, did we?
No, not until the next year.
You were born in a town of Mount Kisco, New York, and she had a room with an outside balcony. And we could go, they wouldn't let the kids in the hospital, the younger, your brothers and sisters, for some reason, I don't know why. So we would go drive into the parking lot under her balcony, and the kids would yell up at you and Remy. Jenny decided your name was going to be Tamba S.
Tamba S.
But we didn't agree
Do
with that.
that, no, okay. And so we ended up in Thornwood. And it was quite a nice, large house. You got, oh, not you, your brothers, sorry, who were up on a floor all by themselves and with a big closet. And I don't know why I can remember the closet. Anyway, and the other kids lived various places. And
I lived in a closet?
no, no. No, well, Paul's middle name is Fox, and then,
David's is Fred,
yeah,
and my mother's name was Ruth, so,
well, and I
Who
had
was-
an Aunt Ruth,
yeah, Carolyn Ruth.
and Virginia Lee.
Jenny
I
Lee,
just
we
liked
have-
Jenny Lee, I just thought Jenny Lee was really a nice name.
I don't know where we got the Lee from, but yours were our family name.
Mark
Remember what it
Laier?
was?
Mark
You
Laier?
remember what his middle name is, don't you?
Yes. Well, that was my maiden name.